Hi, I'm T-Bone, and welcome to T-Bone's Comics. T-Bone here, and you're watching the very first episode of T-Bone's Comics. And if you like what you see, make sure you drop a like and smash that subscribe button. A couple of months ago, I was looking for an old skateboard down in the basement, but I got sidetracked by my collection of 2,000 comics that hasn't seen the light of day since the mid-90s. So what did I find? Let's go check it out.
Once I brought everything upstairs, I realized I had a mountain of work in front of me. Back in the 80s and 90s, I was pretty good at keeping my books in alphabetical order, bagged and boarded, with my best books in Mylars. But after 30 years, I was worried about what kind of shape they'd be in. My first task was to go through 8 long boxes, plus another 250 loose books, and make an inventory of my collection. While taking inventory, I rebagged and boarded over 800 books and put another 100 books into Mylar bags. Eventually, I want to refresh the entire 2,000 book collection, as well as the long boxes, although I may have to hold on to a few of those lids with my artwork from the 80s. Look at these old bags and boards. Gross! I recycled a ton of these. Once the inventory was complete, I bought 2 short boxes for my select books with the rest of the collection stored in 8 long boxes. Let's take a look at what's in that collection.
The comics I collected back in those days were mostly either sci-fi or horror.
I spent my weekly allowance at my local comic shop and bought titles like Where Creatures Roam, Monster Frankenstein, and reprints of EC Comics from the 50s. I discovered some of my favorite artists, like Mike Ploog, Bernie Wrightston, and Basil Wolverton, whose work on The Monster of Frankenstein, Swamp Thing, and Plop had heavily influenced my early drawing. I loved magazines like Famous Monsters of Filmland, Creepy, and Mad Magazine. My years reading Mad magazines from the 60s, 70s, and 80s were a masterclass in magazine design and illustration. But when it came to comics, I was all about the movie adaptations. The first comic I can remember buying was the second printing of Star Wars #1. In the days before VHS, the only way to revisit my favorite movies was through comics. I was into adaptations of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Blade Runner, Dune, Time Bandits, even Dark Crystal. But above all was this copy of Alien, published by Heavy Metal. As a kid, I couldn't get in to see Alien in theaters, and I probably read this copy on a nightly basis back in the 80s. The artwork in this book is fantastic. I love how Walt Simonson illustrates the famous chestburster scene. Back in 1982, I was really into Conan the Barbarian. I saved my allowance and spent a whopping $20 on this copy of Conan the Barbarian #1. This was my first major investment into comic book collecting and the first book I bought off a comic shop wall.
In the summer of 1982, my dad's friend Dave noticed I was interested in comic books and drawing, so he gave me his collection of Silver Age Marvel comics.
While I was into sci-fi and horror, Dave was all about Marvel superheroes like the Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, and Thor. I knew about Spider-Man and the Hulk from TV, but Dave's collection introduced characters new to me like Submariner, Doctor Strange, Nick Fury, Silver Surfer, Warlock, and the Fantastic Four. This copy of The Incredible Hulk #102 is when Tales to Astonish was renamed The Incredible Hulk and is essentially a reboot for the Hulk series, which only ran 6 issues before being renamed Tales to Astonish. This book was one of my first key comics and, like Conan #1, helped cement my interest in collecting comics.
By the time I was in high school, I was less interested in comics and more interested in skateboarding.
I was still into my favorite characters like Spider-Man, Wolverine, the X-Men, Batman, but everything changed when Frank Miller and Lynn Varley's The Dark Knight Returns came out in 1986. The writing was aimed at adults, and the artwork blew my mind. There wasn't anything like this in comics, and along with Alan Moore's Watchmen, a new age was ushered in. I was getting into new, darker characters like the Vigilante, the Punisher, and Martial Law. Genres like manga were becoming mainstream, and titles like Akira and Lone Wolf and Cub were among my favorites. This also marked the explosion of the independent comic scene, with books like NEC's The Tick and Dark Horse's incredible Aliens series, both achieving overnight cult status. Another huge shift took place once Todd McFarlane began his work on Batman, The Incredible Hulk, and Amazing Spider-Man. McFarlane's art style completely redefined the Marvel way of drawing comics, and like Miller, was a big influence on my art style. To this day, these remain some of the favorite books in my collection.
During the 90s, I worked at a couple comic shops, and this is when I got serious about my collection.
I scored this copy of Two-Fisted Tales number 33, published by EC Comics. This is still the only Golden Age book in my collection that isn't a reprint. I hunted down high-grade silver and Bronze Age issues of Amazing Spider-Man, Batman, and The Uncanny X-Men. These were my first Mylar-worthy books, and it was the first time I began to see comics as a potential investment. I was scoring key comics like the first appearance of Sabretooth in Iron Fist number 14, the first appearance of Bullseye in Daredevil number 131, early appearances of the Punisher in Spectacular Spider-Man, and the first appearance of Poison Ivy in Batman number 181, and of course, the first appearances of Wolverine in Hulk 180, 181, and 182. This was also when I began speculating on comics. Alan Moore and Brian Boland's Batman the Killing Joke was the first book I speculated on. I would buy multiple copies of books like McFarlane's Spider-Man series, Jim Lee's X-Men, Liefeld's X-Force, and the Wolverine series in hopes of cashing in one day. I sold most of these in the 90s for beer money, but I was amazed at how many multiples I still have.
I still haven't found that skateboard, but I'm super stoked to become reacquainted with my comic book collection. So what's next? I'm planning on doing some deep dives into my favorite artists, characters, and series, and looking at a lot more amazing comic book artwork. This was only a taste. There's a lot more to see. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments section below, so let me know what you think I should cover in future episodes. And don't forget to drop a like, smash that subscribe button. See you next time.